Are you able to see the slide? Is full screen? Everything's okay? Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. Thank you for joining us. Before I start, I think if you look at my background, you probably have guessed that I study video games a lot. I play games a lot. All these avatars that you see in my background are the games and VR environment my team has developed over the years. And this will link to the focus of my talk today. My presentation is going to really focus on the social aspect of what my research has found in the past decade or so about how social life is like in game world, and how I view these type of possible phenomena to continue into the metaverse. Okay, so I have 3 points that I would like to make. The first point is that I'm arguing that we need to relook at the way that we think of reality. I don't think that distinction between online, offline life and the distinction between real and virtual is no longer valid. At this point, I do think that from my research, when we interview a lot of people who play MMORPG, a lot of times their reality is really blended. The virtual life and the real life are sort of come hand in hand together, and a lot of times because of the technology, reality is really extended. So in some of the research I've done, for example, we've had people who play games and they literally feel like they live in these 3D gaming worlds, and they really view these kind of gaming world as a real place they actually live in. The second picture is a augmented reality mobile application that my team had developed. From here, what we have done was we took people through this geolocation area in Red Hill, where players actually go and catch the AR object. This is like a Pokemon Go, but without the Pokemon. But the result of this research really suggesting that people are really moving on to this whole idea of, you know, the technology, the virtual and real object, we can potentially blend it in together in everyday life. And the second point I would like to make, and this is linking to why I made the argument that reality now is blended and extended, is because from my research, I've found that a lot of times when people are in the virtual environment, what they really focus on is how they perceive who they are in these virtual world and in relation to others around them. So these are the 2 games that my team had developed. What we have really looked at was that when you are actually taking on an avatar and you have a virtual identity, and how do you really perceive this gaming world, and how does that really link to what might be your psychological attitudes towards the different groups around you. So these kind of research we found basically through certain kind of game mechanics that people do change perceptions about how they relate to the larger societal groups, as well as the gaming environment in general. Okay. My second argument, which is also something I think would become super important if the metaverse really become realized, is this idea of this blending between digital 3D representations and your own identities as human beings. So what I'm arguing is that basically in the virtual world, but also maybe in the future of the metaverse, what people usually would do is that there's a lot of evaluations about what I do, what I say, how I express myself, the representation of myself, and how my virtual character would look like. And at the same time, to couple with that, the possibilities of multiple identities will become really, really wide. It's no longer the idea of I'm just Vivian. I'm also going to be this person right here. I'm also going to be this little guy here. I can also be this 3D, 2D characters. I can be any of the people on my background, basically, when metaverse is realized and when people are able to take on these various digital identities. So let me give you some examples. So in terms of expressions, in my past research in MMO, a lot of people really care about the digital representation of them. And it ranges from, you know, like this is a free character in one of the 2D games. Now, this was my old character in World of Warcraft, which is relatively free. I just have to spend a lot of time to enhance my armor. Now, looking at this is one of my students' fabulous character, which she worked very hard for. And this, then you need people, money, time, you need really invest in all that. But this makes a lot of sense for a lot of players, and they are willing to spend the money and time and effort because this is about expressions of themselves. And I think this will become super critical into the future as well. Now, the second thing I would also want to argue about is that we're going to see a lot of the identity fluidity and the shifting going on. So, for example, this is one of the virtual reality characters my team developed in one of our experimental studies, where basically the technology nowadays is already able to assign you a new identity. So the moment you come to my lab or the moment you get into my virtual reality environment, I will basically tell you you're now a different person. Now, moving forward, is that this is one of my research staff. This is the real picture. Now, we will actually be able to morph her face into a 3D character. Now, that's what technology is able to do now, but it also enables this possibility of, this is another, my research engineer, but you're actually going to be able to edit and decide how you want to look like. So if you wanted to have a perfect face, you're going to be able to into the future. Now, these are also important for humans, especially when we're moving on to the 3D representation type of world. The other thing that I've also noticed is that in my research, a lot of players and gamers actually do think of these, what we call non-player characters, which is these 3D, either AI generated or pre-designed gaming character or VR character. In my research, we have found that people are able to actually form parasocial relationship with these non-existent real humans. They are really just characters in the game, but people are actually able to feel connections with them, identify with them, and then behave sort of like them as well. So I think that into the future, it's also important to look at how actually humans will start to perceive AI or these kind of gaming characters as a real human being and having that kind of interaction. My last point was this idea of between the decentralized online community, virtual community versus more centralized socio-techno structure. In my past research, what I found is a lot of times in the virtual world, gamers' behaviors were really much influenced by the social norms within their community and their relationship with these people around them. And that a lot of times will go beyond what the gaming company and also the gaming environment allows them to do. So in other words, there's this more decentralized sort of community spirit and developing their own norms and things like that. But at the same time, in my research, I've also noticed that a lot of these social behaviors and relationships are really dictated by what the gaming companies will provide the gamers to play with. So there's these two aspects that I've observed in my research. So because in my research, I look at both pro-social and anti-social behaviors in games. So if you look at these pictures on the left, these are people who are dating in video games, because games are no longer just for entertainment. That's also for social connections. So they do feel this kind of affection and connections, and then they start to build their own little world in this prefab kind of gaming world. Now, at the same time, my research on the more toxic behaviors and these game cheating behaviors would also show that, okay, now gamers sometimes, even though the gaming companies are governing these kind of behaviors, but they also find their way out and do something about it. So I'm seeing this kind of power struggle that is happening in video games, and I'm thinking in terms of looking into the future, in terms of metaverse. One of the excitement about metaverse is this possibility of decentralization, this possibility of we don't need a bank, we don't necessarily follow government, or maybe we'll get out of the gaming world and decide what kind of environment we would like to build ourselves. So one example I could give you, this is also from one of my earlier research on the place and this and how people think about their gaming world. So Blizzard started this game, which is a classic, and they stopped it, but then gamers started actually their own copy of it. Gamers actually just rebuilt it, run their own server, and they continue the classic game because they didn't like the newer patches. Now, to the extent that Blizzard decided to sue them. But then again, at the end of the day, they actually brought back World of Warcraft Classic. So in some ways, I am seeing the possibility of this sort of more decentralized power from the community that might occur in the future. But again, this is some of the dynamic that I've observed over the years of my gaming research. So I think I'm going to stop here with my 3 major points. And thank you for joining me today.